Hello guys! Yes, you read the title right. I'm finally going to talk about my book. I'm going to assume that most of you guys know I have been writing a book, although if you don't follow me on Instagram or Twitter, you might actually not be aware of that fact. I have mentioned it in a few videos though, so probably you know already. And of course, if you've been following me for several years now, or maybe even since the beginning of my channel, you know that I did talk about my writing a lot more probably at the beginning of my channel. To be honest, even though I have continued to write pretty much my entire life, like since I was 8 or 9, it was when I started really writing and really getting into it. That's when the dream appeared of being a writer, and I haven't lost that, definitely. But of course, there have been times in my life when it's been more difficult to write, or when I've had less time or less inspiration, and I would definitely say that the past couple of years, excluding the past year or so, has been one of those more difficult times, so I didn't talk about it as much on my channel. And I've been a little bit hesitant to talk about it even now that I'm in a routine, just because I don't want anyone to think like I'm advertising this as in it's something that very soon you're going to be able to buy, because it's not. It's not finished yet. It still has a lot of work probably to be done. The goal right now is to hopefully have it done and ready to be like redrafted some more, but to have at least like a pretty solid draft done within the next 6 months or so. But obviously that's very flexible. Like if in 6 months it's not done, don't be surprised, just because I don't really know. I mean, this is the 3rd book I've written. That's something, but it's still not like, I'm not Stephen King or something, so I can't quite predict how long it's gonna take me. And of course, I have a full-time job, I have YouTube, I have a husband, I have traveling, I have like all these other things that are commanding of my time. So it affects the time that I have to write, it affects the energy I have to write, etc. Anyway, despite the fact that I don't have the book done and I don't have the book anywhere for you guys to read, I've been getting a ton of questions about the thing itself, and I thought it was just about time to make a video explaining to you guys kind of the basics of the book, sort of what it's about, sort of how I'm writing it, and just answer basically a lot of the questions that I've been getting on social media. So let's just jump into it then. Firstly, the genre, and it's not going to come as a huge shock for people who probably have watched my other writing related videos, but it is young adult fantasy. I would definitely say that this is the genre that I feel the most drawn to. This is my 3rd book, and all of them have been young adult, and all of them have been fantasy. Well, the second one was kind of more sci-fi, but it still had some fantasy-esque themes. So it's pretty consistent in what I like to write so far. Not saying I won't branch out, but I love it a lot. The idea that I'm now getting into a full-fledged novel is one that I had several years ago, and it's one that I started actually drafting the plot and everything for probably 4 or 5 years ago now. And I've kept the majority of those original things. I've changed around definitely a lot of the smaller details, some of the bigger details about the plot, but for the most part, the bare bones of it is very similar to the original. But I worked really hard on the original, so I'm really glad that I've been able to stick with the majority of those things. It is low fantasy specifically, so it takes place in a fictional town, but I'm sort of envisioning it as sort of small town US in terms of the vibe. I have a main character who is a female, and she's about 16 or 17, and then she has a friend. Well, he doesn't really start a friend, but someone who becomes a friend and sort of her companion. So those are my 2 main characters that I spend the majority of the time with, and a lot of the plot, I don't really want to say too much. I don't want to give away the plot completely, and I haven't gotten to the stage where I feel completely comfortable with explaining the concept of the book in full details. Definitely will be coming in the future if you guys want to hear more about it, but for the moment, I'm just gonna say that it has a lot to do with their story and what they're finding out, but what they're learning and what they're getting thrown into basically has to do with their parents. So it has this aspect of generations that the whole book is set up on, and that factors into the plot a lot more than just the main characters and their parents. Hundreds of years ago, these creatures came to the Earth, and no one knows how, but they invaded the Earth basically, and some of them were very warlike and wanted to take over the Earth. Others were peaceful, and it caused a lot of issues. I'm not gonna get too into all of that. That was centuries ago, and now in the modern times, it's kind of become a myth and a legend, and the average people don't believe that it's even true. They just believe it's a story, it's not actually a real thing that happened, and these creatures don't live on Earth anymore. But what you don't know is that obviously they do. You guys probably guessed that. And there are little communities of people that form these sort of cults that research this legend, and they believe in it. So they have all these texts, and they go on all these like different research trips and stuff, and try to find the communities and try to just find out more about them. And of course there are other aspects of that that I would love to get into, but I'm not going to for the moment. My main character is not a part of this. She has grown up her entire life just believing that it is a legend. Her dad's told it to her and read it to her or whatever, and she just doesn't believe it's ever true. And then something happens right at the beginning of the book, which I'm not gonna tell you, even though it's at the beginning, that makes her realize that her father is actually a part of one of these cults. And yeah, so throughout the book, basically the main thing that causes the series of events that takes place throughout the plot is based on this fact that she was excluded from this her entire life, and now she's being like thrown into it. So I'm not gonna give you too many details about why she gets thrown into it, why she now has to be a part of it. Hopefully that gives you kind of an idea about the sort of themes in the book. It has a lot to do with legend and secrets, and it's very fantastical, obviously, because it revolves so heavily around these creatures that I've invented. But at the same time, it is low fantasy, so it does take place in the average world, and my main characters are average people. As far as the length of the book, again, I don't exactly know. I'm not aiming for a specific word count. For me, maybe it's helpful for some writers, but I don't really like to necessarily give myself a sure goal that I feel like I have to write towards. I can't go over or above. I originally thought it was probably going to be somewhere between 80,000 and 90,000 words, but I'm actually thinking it's going to be a little bit more than that now. Kind of depends on how this last section plays out, but now I'm sort of thinking it's going to be between 90,000 and 100,000 words probably. If I had to pick a goal, it would probably be 100,000 because it's such a like nice round number, but that's just me being weird. I've actually been keeping this little graphic that I found online of the different Harry Potter books and their different word counts as just sort of a reference of like how many words what would it look like actually in a published type of format. So right now that would put me between the lengths of Chamber of Secrets and Prisoner of Azkaban, just for reference. So now onto the juicy part of how I'm writing it and sort of my process in general. As I mentioned, I do have a full-time job. I do have a lot of other things that sort of demand my time. So at the moment, I feel pretty good about myself if I can get a couple of writing sessions done in the week. When I have a little bit more time though, or a little bit more energy, obviously I will do several more sessions a week. And then of course, when I have stuff like vacations or friends visiting or anything like that, then I do fewer sessions. My word count goal is pretty standard, 1,000, but I'm typically not very happy unless I get at least 1,500, despite the fact that I know my goal is still 1,000. I've considered different types of apps for writing, and I've considered trying some different ones to help me, but so far I haven't really wanted to plunk down the money. Typically they do cost for something that I'm not really sure is going to improve my writing. So for the moment I write in a Word document on my computer. I use Evernote for my notes about the plot. So basically you can have like a little notebook within Evernote and separate notes. I'm saying note a lot, but it just happens to be the word, but separate files within that app. And each one, for example, I have one for each of my main characters. I have one for my details about the fantasy creatures that I have in my book. I have one for settings. I have one for the past, because a lot of the plot does have to do with the past of my main character's parents and the side character's parents. And then I have separate notes for my plot details. This book is the first time that I have really done a detailed plot before I ever write a word in the story. Basically what I did was I sat down over maybe probably a couple of writing sessions and wrote every single scene, and this has changed a lot. It's not something that I make myself stick to, but I wrote out basically each scene, what happens in each scene, the sort of basic gist of what they learn in each scene. I think this has helped me quite a bit. First of all, it's helped me because I started writing these details a couple years ago, and then I took little breaks and stuff when I was doing my master's degree, when I was job searching, and like all these times in my life when it was just too stressful and not enough time and stuff. Once I started working on it consistently again, which was about 6 months ago, probably maybe closer to 8 months ago, I would not have remembered so many details of what I wanted to write. There would be so much that would just be gone forever because I'd never written notes and I'd so long forgotten it. But since I wrote this detailed plot, I still have all those details, and there's just a few things I sort of have to refresh in my mind, and obviously I changed some stuff, but it's still all there for me to work with, so that has saved my life. The second way this is helpful is it definitely helps me keep a structure as I'm writing. I do want a lot of things to be a little bit flexible. I want to write them as I'm writing the actual story and not have everything planned out, but a lot of it does need to be planned out. If you're going to actually be able to get from point A to point B, you have to sort of know how you're going to do that. I think it saved me a lot of trouble in my future drafts just because it feels like it's going to be much more cohesive once it's finished. I'll let you guys know, of course, as I continue to progress in this book and as I continue to draft and things like that. I'll let you guys know how I think this method works overall. It is very subjective, so I would say that even if if it works great for me, it may not work for you, but yeah, I'd still like to let you guys know if it works for me and if I could recommend it as something to try. For the moment, I do absolutely recommend it. So yeah, I think I will end the video there. I think I've probably blabbed on enough about my book. Hopefully I answered most of you guys' questions, and hopefully this was somewhat interesting for you guys. If there are still questions that you have, you can let me know in the comments below, but keep in mind that some things I may not want to say just yet. Also, if you guys are working on any creative projects as well, and I know a lot of you guys are because you've talked about them before, but let me know in the comments what you're working on, how it's going, any of those things, any details you want to give about your project. I'm super curious to find out. I'm sure I'll be doing more videos about this in the future, but they might be kind of spaced out. Obviously, I want to do stuff where I actually have something new to tell you guys. But if you want to know sort of like when I'm writing, how things are going on more of a week-to-week basis, then definitely follow me on Instagram and Twitter, but I would say Instagram is an even better place to get more writing updates. So if you're interested, that is definitely a good place to find me on the internet. As always, thank you guys all so much for watching, and I will see you very soon.